The funeral home in Ravenshire isn't like any other. It breathes when no one is looking. The coffins don't stay closed, the bodies don't stay still. The air inside clings to your skin, thick with something rotten, something old, something hungry. And at night, the dead knock to be let out. Some nights they whisper, other nights they scream. But the worst nights? The worst nights are when you hear your own voice calling from inside the caskets. That's when you run. Because once the dead know your name, you don't have much time left. When I got the job at Ravenshire Funeral Home, I thought it would be simple. A quiet place, a decent paycheck, and a way to be left alone. But I was wrong. The Ravenshire Funeral Home does not belong to the living. The moment I stepped through its doors, I felt it, a presence, heavy and suffocating, wrapping around me like a shroud. The air inside was different, thick with something stale, something rotting beneath the surface. It smelled of old wood, damp earth, and flowers that had died long ago. But the worst part was the silence. It wasn't empty. It was watching. It listened. I couldn't shake the feeling that the building itself was aware of me. I should have turned around, but desperation makes people do foolish things. The funeral home was larger than I expected. 2 floors, stretching far back, lined with doors that led to rooms I wasn't sure I wanted to enter. Dim chandeliers flickered overhead, casting shadows that moved when they shouldn't have. The wallpaper was peeling. The wooden floors creaked beneath my weight, and the air was so cold that I could see my own breath. In the center of the main hall stood an open casket. I stopped. There was no body inside, just a folded black suit, carefully arranged, and a pair of polished shoes resting at the foot of the coffin, as if someone had been laid to rest and then decided to get up. I shivered and hurried to the office, where I met Mr. Alden Graves. He was a tall, gaunt man, his skin so pale it looked stretched too thin over his bones. His fingers were long and bony, tapping against the desk in a slow, rhythmic pattern. His eyes were sunken, dark pits that didn't blink enough. "You want the job?" he asked, his voice dry, brittle, like something that had been locked away in a tomb for too long. I swallowed hard and nodded. Without another word, he reached into his desk and pulled out an old, tattered notebook. He placed it in front of me and slid it across the desk. The cover was faded, the pages yellowed with age. It smelled faintly of something foul, like something that had been buried and dug up again. "Read the rules," he said. "Follow them. If you break even one, you won't see morning." I let out a nervous chuckle, expecting some kind of smirk, a sign that he was joking, but his expression didn't change. Read them. A chill ran through me as I flipped open the notebook. The handwriting inside was jagged, hurried, like someone had scribbled the words in fear. 5 strange rules to survive at Ravenshire Funeral Home. Rule 1. The bodies don't always stay where we leave them. If you hear movement inside a locked casket, do not open it. It is not trapped. It is not alive. It is trying to trick you. My stomach twisted as I read the words. Rule 2. At exactly 3:12 a.m., you will hear knocking from the embalming room. Do not answer it. Do not speak. Do not move. Hold your breath. If it stops after 3 knocks, you are safe. If it knocks a 4th time, pray. The room suddenly felt colder. I gripped the notebook tighter, my fingers going numb. Rule 3. The woman in the black veil will come to the viewing room at 4 a.m. You will never see her enter. You will never see her leave. Do not look at her face. Do not acknowledge her. If she asks for the time, say, "It's too late." Then turn away and wait for her to leave. My hands trembled slightly, the words blurring as my pulse pounded in my ears. Rule 4. If the phone rings after 2 a.m., do not answer. No one is calling. No one should be calling. If you hear your own voice on the other end, hang up immediately. I licked my lips, suddenly aware of how dry my mouth had become. Rule 5. If you see something in the mirror that isn't you, do not break eye contact. Do not blink. Do not run. Walk backwards, keeping your eyes locked on it, and leave the room. If you break eye contact before you're out, it will take your place. A cold dread settled in my bones. I looked up at Mr. Graves, expecting him to smirk, to tell me it was all part of some elaborate joke. He didn't. His face remained hollow, expressionless. "Do you understand?" he asked. My mouth was dry, my body tense. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I needed the money. I forced a nod. "Good," he said, standing up. "Your shift starts now." He walked past me and out of the office, his footsteps slow and deliberate. The moment the door creaked shut behind him, I felt it again. The silence. But it wasn't empty. It was breathing. And it knew I was here. Somewhere in the funeral home, a door creaked open. I wasn't alone. The sound of the door creaking open sent a violent shiver down my spine. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The funeral home had been silent just seconds ago. But now, I wasn't alone. I turned my head ever so slightly, my ears straining to pick up any further noise. The air had grown heavier, pressing against my skin like a damp cloth. The creak hadn't come from the office. It had come from somewhere deeper inside the funeral home. Slowly, I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway. The chandeliers overhead swayed slightly, though there was no draft. The walls loomed taller than they had before, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the floor. My fingers tightened around the edges of my sleeves, trying to ground myself. A soft, shuffling noise drifted from the main hall, the same hall where I had seen that open casket earlier. I swallowed hard. I hadn't heard anyone else enter the funeral home. Mr. Graves had left. There was no one else here. So who was moving? My body resisted, every nerve screaming at me to turn around, to walk out the front door and never come back. But my feet betrayed me, carrying me forward, drawn by some morbid curiosity. Or perhaps the sheer dread of knowing that if I didn't look, whatever was there might come looking for me instead. As I reached the main hall, the first thing I noticed was the coffin. It was closed now. I knew. I had seen it open earlier. The empty suit, the polished shoes, everything had been carefully arranged. But now the lid was shut tight, its brass latches locked in place. And yet, something was off. The coffin had been at the center of the hall. Now, it was 2 feet closer to the door. A single drop of cold sweat slid down my back. I forced myself to take a step forward. The floor groaned under my weight. The moment the sound echoed through the hall, the casket rattled. I stumbled back, my heart slamming into my ribs. No, 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 I hadn't imagined it. Something inside had shifted. I held my breath, my mind racing. Rule 1. The bodies don't always stay where we leave them. The thought made me lightheaded. I clenched my fists. Do not open it. It is not trapped. It is not alive. It is trying to trick you. I wasn't going to open it. I wasn't stupid. But my ears, they betrayed me. Because in the absolute silence of the funeral home, I heard something horribly wrong. A whisper, muffled, coming from inside the coffin. A voice, not pleading, not desperate, but laughing. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the office, slamming the door shut behind me. My pulse thundered in my skull, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my fingers dug into the wooden desk, my legs trembling so badly I nearly collapsed. This was a mistake. I had to leave. But then, the clock on the wall clicked, a sound so sharp, so final, that it froze me in place. My stomach twisted. 1 more minute. I squeezed my eyes shut. The knocking started, a slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap from the embalming room. It wasn't loud. That somehow made it worse. Rule 2. Do not answer it. Do not speak. Do not move. Hold your breath. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to go utterly still. My lungs burned. My heartbeat pounded like a drum. 3 knocks. I waited, counting the seconds, hoping, praying that it would stop. And then, a 4th knock. I nearly choked on my own breath. My vision blurred at the edges as sheer terror took hold. I had read the rules. I knew what that meant. Pray. I didn't know what to do. What was I praying to? Was I supposed to run? To hide? My hands curled into the fabric of my shirt, desperate for something, anything to hold on to. The knocking stopped. The silence that followed was unbearable. But something was wrong. Because the office door wasn't shut anymore. It was slightly open. I hadn't heard it move. I hadn't felt the air shift. It had just changed. I forced my gaze downward. The floor outside the office was visible through the crack, and beneath the flickering light of the hallway, I saw shadows stretching towards me. Not cast by anything. Not natural. They were reaching. The temperature in the office plunged. My breath curled in the air, my skin erupting in goosebumps. I had to move. Now. I turned toward the desk, fumbling with my trembling hands, looking for something, anything, that could protect me. But before I could react, something changed again. The phone rang. Rule 4. My throat closed. If the phone rings after 2 a.m., do not answer. I squeezed my eyes shut. The ringing was piercing, shrill, each chime feeling like a nail being hammered into my skull. The air behind me shifted. I felt a presence, not just behind me, next to me. Close enough that if I moved, it would know. The phone rang again. And then, a voice. My voice. From the other end of the line. I see you. I broke. I grabbed the receiver and slammed it down. The ringing stopped. The presence behind me didn't. I turned my head an inch, just enough to see the reflection in the window. The thing standing beside me wasn't human. I knew it before my brain could fully process the shape of it. The air around it was wrong, thick and heavy like a dense fog, pressing against my skin, seeping into my lungs. My body rebelled against it, every nerve in my being screaming that I should not be seeing this. But I couldn't move. My gaze was locked forward, refusing to turn, refusing to acknowledge the presence at my side. My fingers dug into the edge of the desk, knuckles turning white, nails scraping against the wood. My breathing was too shallow, too fast, and every part of me trembled with the sheer effort of not looking. The silence stretched, suffocating. The thing beside me did not move. And then, in a voice that scraped against my ears like glass being dragged across concrete, "You're in my place." I clamped my lips shut, choking back a whimper. The voice was too close. It sounded like me, my chest seized, my heartbeat rattling against my ribs. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But Rule 5, do not break eye contact, do not blink, do not run. I forced my breathing to slow. The thing beside me was waiting, watching. It wanted me to look at it. It wanted me to acknowledge it. No, I wouldn't. I shifted my weight ever so slightly, inching my foot back, then another step. The air rippled around me, thick with unseen movement. It knew I was trying to leave. Black, something wet brushed against my ear, a whisper so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. "I'll be you soon." A cold, bony hand slid over mine. I snapped. With every ounce of strength in my body, I jerked backward, keeping my eyes locked forward, not daring to blink as I stumbled toward the door. My breath came in ragged gasps, my vision blurring at the edges. The thing beside me moved when I moved, shifting unnaturally, mirroring my every step. The moment I crossed the threshold into the hallway, the lights flickered violently. The air shuddered, as if the entire building had let out a breath. And just like that, the thing was gone. My legs nearly collapsed under me. My hands trembled so badly I could barely grip the edge of the doorway. But I was alive. I staggered back, my stomach churning, my mind racing. I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted to run. But then the hallway clock clicked. My breath hitched. Rule 3, the woman in the black veil. I had 1 minute. The hallway felt longer now, the air colder, the shadows deeper. My body was still recovering from what had just happened, but I forced myself to move. One step, then another. I reached the main hall just as the clock struck 4 a.m., and she was already there. I hadn't heard her enter. I hadn't seen her arrive. But now, she stood in the middle of the viewing room, her back turned to me, a long black veil cascading down her shoulders. Her hands were bone pale, fingers impossibly long as they hovered over one of the closed coffins. My body went rigid. She was here. And I knew the rule. Do not look at her face. Do not acknowledge her. I didn't move. The silence in the room was unbearable. Then, slowly, her head turned ever so slightly in my direction. I swallowed hard, keeping my gaze locked downward. I could feel her eyes on me, though I couldn't see them through the veil. She took a step closer. The sound of her footsteps sent a fresh wave of paralysis through my body, and then she spoke. Soft, hollow, like the last breath before death. "What time is it?" My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth would crack. I knew the rule. I knew what I had to say. But my throat had closed up, my voice trapped in my lungs. Her fingers twitched, her head tilted slightly as if she were waiting, expecting. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I forced my lips to move. "It's too late." The words barely made it out. My voice sounded weak, brittle, but she heard me. A long silence followed. Then she turned away. She stepped back toward the casket. And then she was gone. I let out a shaky breath, my legs trembling beneath me. I was still here. I had followed the rules, but the room felt different now. The casket she had touched was open. And inside was a body that wasn't there before. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat, because the body inside was me. Not just someone who looked like me, not some twisted mockery. It was me, down to the smallest detail. The same clothes, the same cut on my left knuckle from when I scraped it earlier tonight, the same half-healed bruise on my wrist. My own lifeless face stared up at me, mouth slightly open, eyes half-lidded, as if caught mid-sentence before death claimed me. My stomach twisted violently. This wasn't possible. I stumbled back, nearly toppling over the other caskets in the room. My mind screamed at me to run, to get out, to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But my body refused to move, locked in place by the overwhelming, gut-churning wrongness of what I was seeing. The air in the room shifted. I heard breathing. Not mine. Shallow, slow, coming from inside the casket. Then the body's lips twitched. I barely had time to react before its mouth stretched open, unnaturally wide, jaw unhinging like a snake. A breathless, wet gasp escaped from its throat, as if it were trying to suck in air, despite the obvious truth. It should be dead. My legs finally obeyed. I turned and ran. I didn't care where. I just had to get away from that thing. My pulse pounded in my skull as I bolted down the hallway, my shoes slapping against the cold tile floor. The funeral home stretched out around me, the dim light casting grotesque, shifting shadows on the walls. The moment I reached the main corridor, the phone on the front desk rang. A shrill, piercing sound that made my blood run cold. Rule 4. I skidded to a stop, heart hammering against my ribs. No one should be calling. Not at this hour. Not after everything that just happened. I backed away, forcing myself to keep breathing, keep thinking. The ringing continued, the sound slicing through the unnatural silence. Then, the answering machine clicked on, and I heard my own voice. Static crackled. Then, barely above a whisper, "Don't turn around." A cold breath brushed against the back of my neck. A scream tore up my throat, but I clamped my teeth together, refusing to let it out. I squeezed my eyes shut, fists clenched so tightly my nails bit into my palms. I wasn't alone. I could feel it standing there, just inches behind me, watching, waiting. My breathing came in shallow gasps, chest tight with terror. If I turned around, I knew I wouldn't see myself anymore. I would see something else, something that wanted to wear my skin. The phone clicked off. The silence was unbearable. Then, a whisper, right against my ear. "Run." I didn't hesitate. I tore down the hallway, my limbs numb with terror. I didn't know where I was going. I just had to get away. The air around me felt thicker, the walls closing in, the overhead lights flickering wildly as I sprinted through the funeral home. I turned a corner and slammed face first into a door. The embalming room, the worst place I could be. I sucked in a sharp breath. I had to move. I had to. Then I heard it. Knocking. From the other side of the door. My stomach dropped. 3:12 a.m. I had run straight into Rule 2. I bit down on my lip so hard I tasted blood. 3 knocks. That was the rule. If it stops after 3 knocks, I'm safe. The first knock came, loud, deliberate. I clenched my jaw, muscles locked so tight they ached. The second knock. My breath hitched. I pressed my back against the wall, eyes squeezed shut, fighting against the overwhelming urge to run. The third knock. Silence. I let out a slow, shaky breath. It was over. Then, a fourth knock. The moment the fourth knock hit, the door rattled violently, as if something massive was slamming against it. The walls shook. The air grew suffocatingly cold. And then, the doorknob started to turn. I choked back a sob, my entire body screaming at me to move, but I couldn't. My limbs felt like they'd been turned to lead. The door creaked open, just a sliver, and in the crack of darkness beyond it, a hand. Gray, thin, fingers too long for any human body. The nails were blackened, curling at the edges, dragging slowly down the wood of the doorframe. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The hand twitched, and then it pointed at me. I sucked in a sharp breath, every part of me paralyzed. The thing beyond the door let out a sound, a dry, rattling breath, something between a wheeze and a growl. Then the lights died. Total, absolute darkness. I couldn't see. I couldn't move. My breath was too loud, my heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst. And then, something grabbed my ankle. I screamed. The lights flashed back on for a single flickering second, just long enough for me to see what was holding me. Not a person. Not an animal. Something else. Its mouth stretched open, wide enough to swallow me whole. Then, darkness again. My body jerked violently, and then I was somewhere else. The embalming room was gone. The funeral home was gone. I was standing in a hallway I didn't recognize. And in front of me, a row of mirrors. The mirrors stretched in both directions, disappearing into darkness. I didn't recognize this place. I didn't know how I got here. But deep in my gut, I felt it. I wasn't alone. A shuddering breath escaped my lips. My own reflection stared back at me, a perfect copy, too perfect. Every twitch of my fingers, every tremble in my chest mirrored exactly. No delay, no distortion. But something felt wrong. The air was thick, almost pressing against my skin, like I was being watched from all sides. My pulse pounded in my ears as I forced my feet to move, stepping carefully down the endless hallway of glass. Then, a flicker. Barely a shift. A single frame of something off. I stopped cold, breath catching in my throat. My reflection was still staring at me, still standing exactly as I was. But now, it was smiling. I wasn't smiling. My lips were frozen in a tight, horrified grimace. But the thing in the mirror, it was grinning. Wide, too wide. A slow, creeping expression stretched across its face, something human-shaped but not human. A strangled noise stuck in my throat as I took a step back. The grin on my reflection grew wider, as if it could feel my fear, as if it was feeding off of it. And then, it tilted its head. I didn't move. I didn't tilt my head. The thing inside the mirror had stopped mimicking me. Cold terror shot through my veins. Rule 5. Do not break eye contact. Do not blink. Do not run. I wanted to close my eyes, to squeeze them shut and wake up from this nightmare, but I couldn't. My gaze stayed locked on the grinning thing in the glass, my body trembling violently. Its eyes gleamed, like it knew I was trapped. Then it moved. Slowly, its right arm lifted. So did mine. Its left arm rose. So did mine. But then, it took a step forward, and I didn't. My stomach dropped. The thing was coming toward me, not just pressing against the glass, stepping out of it. A high, keening sound built in my throat. I couldn't move. My own reflection was leaving the mirror, its body pushing against the surface as if it were water, the glass rippling, distorting. Its hand broke through first. Pale, wrong, stretching into reality, long fingers twitching. I was going to die. My body screamed for me to run, but my legs were locked in place. If I broke eye contact now, it would take my place. The glass shattered. A sharp, ear-splitting crack rang through the air, and I finally, desperately, stumbled backward. I didn't blink. I didn't turn. I just moved, one unsteady step after another, my breath ragged and shallow. The thing crawled forward. Its grin was too wide now, splitting open its face. Its eyes glowed with something inhuman. Its hands, too many fingers, too many joints, clawed at the air as it dragged itself toward me. I kept moving, slow, steady, never breaking eye contact. I could hear the glass crunching beneath its feet, hear its nails scraping against the floor. I was almost at the doorway. Almost. A whisper slid into my ear, soft and cold as ice. I was here first. Something grabbed my wrist. A sharp, violent pull. I blinked. I had no choice. I blinked. Darkness swallowed me whole. For one horrible second, I felt like I was falling, being pulled down into something cold and endless. And then, I slammed into a floor. I gasped, sucking in a lungful of air, my head spinning. I was still alive. I was back in the funeral home. But something was wrong. The lights were off. The hallway stretched out in front of me, flickering dimly at the edges. And from the viewing room, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate. Rule 3, the woman in the black veil. My stomach lurched. 4 a.m. I had no idea how much time had passed. But she was here now. A sick feeling crawled up my spine as I forced myself to stand. My limbs felt weak, my skin damp with cold sweat. The footsteps were getting closer. I turned my head just slightly, just enough to see a figure. Tall, motionless, dressed entirely in black, her face hidden beneath a heavy draping veil. I swallowed hard. I could feel my heartbeat pulsing in my throat. Do not look at her face. Do not acknowledge her. If she asks for the time, what time is it? Her voice was like dry leaves crumbling in the wind, soft, hollow. I opened my mouth, but my throat was sandpaper. Say it. Say the words. It's too late. The air shifted, a long silence stretched between us. Then the figure turned and vanished. The tension in my body collapsed all at once. I sagged against the wall, my head pounding, my breath ragged. I needed to get out of here. But as I turned toward the exit, a shape moved in the darkness ahead. I froze. The air grew colder. And then the phone rang. A shrill, unnatural sound that cut through the silence like a knife. I stared at it, my breath shallow, my limbs frozen. It was after 2 a.m. No one should be calling. No one was calling. My fingers twitched at my sides, instinct begging me to answer it, to stop the sound, to silence the thing that shouldn't be happening. But I knew the rule. Do not answer. Do not pick it up. The phone let out another ring. But this time, something changed. I heard it. A whisper. Beneath the sound, my stomach clenched violently, my pulse hammering in my throat. The whisper wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from behind me. Cold breath slid against the back of my neck. My body locked up. I wasn't alone. I could hear it breathing. Right there, inches away. My skin crawled with the horrible, suffocating realization. Something was waiting for me to pick up that phone. The next ring came, and this time the whisper turned into a voice. My voice. Pick up. Please. I need to tell you something. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. Do not answer. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the sound to stop. Another ring. Another whisper, this time more urgent. Please. You have to listen. They're coming. I swallowed thickly, my hands shaking. Another ring. Then, the sound cut off. Silence swallowed the room. I waited, my whole body stiff, my ears straining for anything in the darkness. Then the whispering started again. Not from behind me, not from the phone, from everywhere. Soft voices crawling out of the walls, slipping through the cracks, seeping into my skin. They were chanting, repeating my name. Alex, Alex, Alex. A sharp bang erupted from the embalming room. My body jerked. No, 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 no. I knew what this was. The knocking. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. The embalming room door stood at the end of the hall, bathed in the dim, flickering light. Another knock. Louder this time. Do not answer it. Do not move. Do not speak. My fingers dug into my palms, nails biting into my skin as I stood there, paralyzed. Another knock. My lungs burned, desperate for air, but I did not breathe. And then, a fourth knock. Ice-cold terror sliced through my body. A fourth knock meant I sucked in a ragged breath, my vision swimming. Prey. The whispers in the walls grew louder. Something scratched against the inside of the embalming room door, long, dragging nails scraping the wood. I took a slow, shaky step backward. The door bulged. Something was pressing against it from the other side, pushing outward, like the wood was nothing more than a fragile layer of skin. A muffled voice seeped through the cracks. Alex. It wasn't my voice this time. It was something else. Something wrong. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. A slow, creaking sound filled the air. The doorknob was turning. My breath hitched. I turned and ran. I didn't care about the rules anymore. I sprinted down the hallway, my vision blurring with terror, my pulse hammering in my ears. The walls stretched. The hallway grew longer. I wasn't getting anywhere. The embalming room door slammed open behind me. A gust of freezing air rushed through the hall. I felt it. Something huge, crawling out. A shadow stretched along the floor, impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its fingers dragging behind it. A choked sob tore from my throat. I wasn't going to make it. I was going to die. Then, a hand grabbed my wrist. I gasped, my body seizing up. A voice, urgent and familiar, whispered in my ear. Run, now. I turned my head and nearly screamed. It was a man. Tall, dressed in an old funeral home uniform. His face gaunt, his eyes filled with terror. I had never seen him before, but somehow, I knew his name. Eddie Lopez, the man who had disappeared years ago. Before I could say anything, he shoved me forward. Don't stop! It's coming! I stumbled, then ran, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The shadow shrieked, a high, unnatural wail that rattled through my skull. Eddie grabbed a door handle and yanked it open, shoving me inside before slamming it shut behind us. Darkness, silence. I collapsed onto the floor, my chest heaving. Eddie stood against the door, his body rigid, his hands shaking. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, in a hoarse, broken voice, I whispered, "What is happening?" Eddie turned his head toward me, his face pale and hollow. "You should have never taken this job." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. "The rules. They don't protect you," he cut in. His eyes burned with something desperate. "They just delay the inevitable." My stomach twisted painfully. The walls around us shuddered. A soft tapping sound echoed through the darkness. Knocking. Eddie's face drained of color. "We have to move, now." But I couldn't move, because right across the room there was a mirror, and I could see something inside it. Something was watching me from the mirror. My body locked up, every instinct screaming at me to look away, to shut my eyes, to pretend I didn't see it. But I knew the rule. Do not break eye contact. Do not blink. Do not run. The figure in the glass tilted its head, a slow, unnatural movement like its neck was barely attached, its lips twisted, stretching into a grin too wide for a human face. It looked like me, but wrong. Its skin was too pale, almost gray. Its eyes too dark, too hollow. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I could feel Eddie behind me, his presence a trembling weight in the darkness. He had gone completely still. "You need to move," he whispered. The thing in the mirror moved its lips, not in time with mine, not a reflection. Something else. My own voice slithered from its mouth, but it didn't match my words. "You've already lost." I clenched my jaw, taking a slow, careful step backward. The figure stepped forward. It was getting closer. My hands shook violently. My vision blurred with terror, my throat closing as I fought to keep my eyes locked onto its empty, soulless stare. Another step back, another step forward. It was mirroring me in reverse. My pulse slammed against my ribs. The figure leaned in. Its face was right up against the glass, its too wide grin splitting open, revealing teeth. Long, jagged, rotting teeth. "Let me out." A cold, sharp pressure coiled around my skull, something unseen but suffocating. "You don't belong here." I felt something shifting behind my eyes, something trying to take my place. I took another step back. The figure pressed a hand against the glass. The mirror bulged, like the surface was soft, like it was pushing through. No, 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 no. I was almost out of the room. 5 more steps. 4, 3. The figure jerked forward, its mouth stretching open far too wide. "Don't blink." Eddie's voice cut through the panic, sharp and desperate. I forced my eyes to stay open, even as they burned, even as tears blurred my vision. 2 steps. 1. My foot crossed the threshold. The pressure in my skull vanished. The air in my lungs collapsed. I slammed the door shut behind me. A sound like glass shattering underwater echoed from inside. The whispers stopped. I sucked in a ragged breath, my body trembling so hard I thought I'd collapse. Eddie grabbed my arm. "We're running out of time." I swallowed hard, my throat dry and aching. Running out of time for what? Eddie's face was pale, his eyes dark and hollow. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "The rules aren't there to keep you safe. They're there to keep it entertained." A slow, horrible realization clawed its way into my mind. This thing, whatever it was playing with me. And it wasn't finished yet. A distant chime rang through the funeral home. 4 a.m. Eddie's breath hitched. "The viewing room," he muttered. I felt ice flood my veins. The woman in the black veil. I turned to Eddie, panic rising in my chest. "What happens if we break the rule?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Eddie's eyes darkened. "You don't want to know." A cold wind drifted through the hallway. She was here. I turned slowly. At the far end of the corridor, past the rows of caskets, past the dim lights and the endless stretching shadows, a woman stood in the viewing room. Her veil was black as oil, draped over her form like a second layer of skin. I never saw her enter. I would never see her leave. She stood perfectly still. Then, she turned her head toward me. The veil shifted. A soft, eerie voice slipped through the air. "What time is it?" A shudder ran through my entire body. I knew the answer. I had to say it. But my voice was gone. My throat locked up, my body frozen under the weight of something ancient and hungry. "What time is it?" A little louder now. The veil moved. I forced the words out, barely a whisper. "It's too late." Silence. The air in the room thickened. The woman didn't move. For a horrible, agonizing moment, I thought I'd said it too late. Then, she turned away. Without a sound, without a step, like a shadow pulling back into the darkness. She was gone. A breath rattled out of me. My body felt like it had been drained of all warmth, all life. I turned to Eddie, my hands trembling. But Eddie wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on something behind me. A deep, low knock rumbled through the funeral home. My blood turned to ice. Eddie went rigid. My mouth went dry. "What was that?" Eddie's lips parted. His voice was barely there. "The caskets." A slow, scraping sound filled the air. Something shifting, something moving. The scraping sound didn't stop. It was slow at first, like nails dragging against wood, a sickening, deliberate sound that made my stomach twist. Then, it got louder. Eddie and I stood frozen in the hallway, our breathing shallow, the dim, flickering lights casting shadows that weren't ours. The lids, the locked lids, shouldn't have been moving. But I heard it. The sound of splintering wood, of slow, careful shifting, like something inside was adjusting itself. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. Then, the first casket creaked open. I didn't see it. I heard it. A soft, gentle creak, like the wood was sighing as it gave way. Then another. Then another. The hallway grew colder. The air turned thick, suffocating, like something was watching us. Eddie made a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a choked-off sob. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I turned my head. The caskets were open, all of them. Rows upon rows of gleaming black boxes, their lids pushed back, revealing the bodies inside. They weren't lying still anymore. They were sitting up. Their heads lolled to the side, their mouths slightly open, as if they had just been whispering to each other. Their eyes, oh God, their eyes, they weren't closed. They weren't open either. Just dark, gaping holes. Eddie grabbed my wrist so hard it hurt. They're awake, he breathed. One of the bodies moved. Not much, just a slow, creaking tilt of the head, like it was listening. My skin prickled. I felt something crawl down my spine. Another shifted. A woman, her hands folded neatly over her stomach. Her skin was waxy, stretched too tight over her bones. She turned her head toward me. A slow, deliberate motion. I squeezed my eyes shut. I wasn't supposed to see this. The rules. The damn rules. Do not open the casket. Do not acknowledge them. But they had opened themselves. The bodies began to rise. Not like something waking up, not like a person pushing themselves upright. It was wrong. Jerkier, like invisible strings were yanking them up. My breath hitched. One of them, a man in a black suit, stood up completely. Eddie yanked me backward. "We have to go," he hissed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The dead man stepped forward. His feet dragged, his joints popping, his neck rolling loosely, as if his head was barely attached. Then he smiled. It was the worst thing I had ever seen. A slow, curling stretch of the lips, too wide, too forced, too unnatural. His teeth were black. His mouth was wrong. Then they all moved, all at once. A synchronized, grotesque lurch forward. Eddie didn't wait. He dragged me down the hall. I stumbled, my legs barely working, my body numb with fear. The sound behind us, shuffling feet, clattering bones. Lips smacking together like they were trying to speak. I couldn't stop myself. I looked back. The funeral home was no longer a funeral home. The walls stretched, flickering between what was real and what shouldn't exist. The caskets were no longer caskets. They were open mouths, gaping, black pits lined with teeth. And the bodies, they weren't bodies anymore. They were things. Their arms were too long, their fingers sharpened. Their faces were twisting, splitting, melting into something that wasn't human. And they were coming toward us. The hallway stretched longer, pulling itself away as if trying to keep us trapped. Eddie yanked open a door at the end of the corridor, shoving me through. We tumbled into the embalming room. The door slammed shut behind us. I collapsed against the wall, my heart slamming against my ribs, my lungs heaving. Silence. Eddie and I locked eyes. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "We broke the rule," he whispered. I swallowed hard. "Then why aren't they following us?" Eddie's face darkened. "They don't have to." The air in the embalming room shifted. Cold, heavy, wrong. A sound echoed in the silence. A knock. My stomach dropped. 3:12 a.m. I knew before I even looked at the clock. The second rule. At exactly 3:12 a.m., you will hear knocking from the embalming room. Do not answer it. Do not speak. Do not move. Hold your breath. We didn't make a sound. I pressed myself against the wall, my muscles locking up. Another knock. Slow, heavy, like something was knocking from inside the room. I squeezed my eyes shut. Eddie's breathing was shallow, his body tense. The third knock came. Then silence. I wanted to believe it was over. I wanted to believe we were safe. Then, a fourth knock. A cold whisper slid through the air. You shouldn't have looked. The walls shivered, the shadows shifted, and the lights went out. Everything went silent. But not the kind of silence that feels empty. This was thick, suffocating, unnatural. A silence that pressed against my ears, swallowing every sound except the pounding of my own heartbeat. Eddie was beside me. I could feel him, but I couldn't see him. The darkness was too heavy, too absolute, like it had weight. Then, something breathed. Not me, not Eddie, something else. It was long, slow, deliberate. A sound so close it might as well have been in my ear. Then a whisper, so faint I wasn't sure if I imagined it. Don't move. I froze. The embalming room shifted. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The air thickened. The walls seemed to stretch. The room was no longer just a room. Something was inside with us. The knocking had stopped, but whatever had knocked was still here. I tried to stay still, tried to breathe as quietly as possible, but I could feel it. Something brushing against my leg. Cold. Dry. A hand. I swallowed the scream that clawed its way up my throat. The darkness wasn't empty. It was crowded. Something shifted to my left, another breath, then another, then a dozen. They were all around us. And then, a click. The fluorescent lights flickered back on. I wish they hadn't, because they were there. Bodies, no things standing too close, lining the walls, the gurneys, the floor. Some were half rotted, their flesh slowing off in places, revealing too white bone. Others were too perfect, their waxy skin frozen in expressions of silent horror. And they were staring at us. Eddie let out a strangled gasp. One of them moved. Its head twitched, a small, jerky motion like a broken marionette. Its jaw unhinged. And then it screamed. The sound was inhuman. A twisted, distorted wail that shook the walls, rattled the steel tables, made my bones feel like they would shatter. The others moved all at once, limbs jerking, heads twisting too far, eyes rolling back into their sockets. They lunged. Eddie grabbed me, yanking me toward the door, but the figures were faster. The door slammed shut before we could reach it. The room tilted. The bodies crawled, hands grasping, pulling, reaching. A hand wrapped around my ankle. It wasn't cold. It was burning hot. I kicked, hard, bone crunched beneath my shoe. Eddie was screaming. Not words, just noise. Because how the hell do you describe what we were seeing? The walls weren't walls anymore. They were covered in faces. Mouths whispering, eyes blinking open, watching. And in the center of the room, something was rising from the floor. Not a body. Something worse. It had no shape, no form, just a mass of shifting limbs, twisting mouths, endless hands reaching, stretching, hungry. Eddie pulled me toward the only place left to run, the viewing room. I didn't care if it was almost 4 a.m. I didn't care about the next rule. We had to get out. We burst through the door just as something grabbed Eddie's shirt. I yanked him free, slamming the door shut behind us. The embalming room went silent, but we weren't safe. Because the moment we turned around, she was there, the woman in the black veil, standing in the middle of the viewing room. The rules slammed into my mind. You will never see her enter. You will never see her leave. But she was there, standing perfectly still, facing the rows of empty chairs. The air grew thick. The clocks ticked too slow, too loud. It was 4 a.m. Eddie and I didn't move. We didn't breathe. Her hands were clasped in front of her, hidden beneath the veil's long, flowing fabric. The only sound was the distant hum of the funeral home's old ventilation system. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft, brittle. Do you have the time? My entire body locked up. Eddie shook beside me. The rule. The damn rule. Do not look at her face. Do not acknowledge her. If she asks for the time, say, it's too late. My mouth felt dry. My tongue felt like lead. I forced the words out. It's too late. For a second, nothing happened. Then her fingers twitched. I kept my gaze locked on the floor. She didn't move, but the veil shifted, like something underneath it was grinning. She took a step forward. The air grew heavier. Another step. My chest ached. I didn't dare look up. She walked past us, her footsteps making no sound. Then, she was gone. Just like that. No sound, no door opening. She had never been there at all. Eddie let out a shaking breath. I turned to him, my pulse still hammering. We have to get out, I whispered. He nodded. We took a step toward the exit. And then the phone rang. A sharp, piercing chime. 2 a.m. had passed. No one should be calling. No one should be calling. I knew the rule. Do not answer. But Eddie, his hand was already reaching for it. I grabbed his wrist. No. His face was pale, drenched in sweat. It might be someone. No one is calling. The phone kept ringing. Shrill. Endless. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then the receiver clicked, and from the phone's speaker, a voice. Not just any voice, my voice. Alex? My stomach dropped. I stared at the phone in horror as the voice on the other end, my voice spoke again. You already broke the rules. It's too late. Then static. Then laughter. And then the line went dead. But the silence it left behind wasn't empty. Something was still there. The phone, still in Eddie's hand, let out a low, static hum. The receiver trembled as if something inside it was trying to crawl out. Then the whisper came again. You already broke the rules. It's too late. And the lights went out again. This time, they didn't come back on. Eddie let out a shuddering breath. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him toward the exit, but something was wrong. The air felt thick, unnatural, like we weren't in the funeral home anymore, like we were somewhere else. Then, the knocking, not from the embalming room, from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, the floor beneath our feet, a relentless rhythmic pounding, but never in the same place twice. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. My lungs locked up. Eddie and I stood frozen. The rule flashed through my mind. If it stops after 3 knocks, you are safe. But then, the fourth knock came, a sickening, heavy sound like flesh hitting wood. Then, the floorboards beneath us groaned. Something was crawling out. I yanked Eddie backward as fingers, gray, brittle, wrong, pushed up between the cracks in the wood. Then came another hand, then another, then another. The boards split apart as the hands pulled. Something was dragging itself up from beneath the funeral home. A twisted mass of bodies writhing together, faces merging, mouths whispering, arms reaching, and they were all looking at us. The whispers grew louder. It's too late. It's too late. It's too late. I turned, yanking Eddie toward the exit door, but the door was gone, just gone, replaced by a mirror, a tall, ornate funeral mirror that hadn't been there before. And in the glass, I saw us, but it wasn't us. The versions of us in the mirror were smiling, not normal smiles, stretched, wide, unnatural, and their eyes black as the void. Eddie froze beside me, because his reflection, his twisted, grinning copy, was stepping forward, coming through the glass. The rules slammed into my mind. Do not break eye contact. Do not blink. Do not run. My breath hitched. The thing that looked like me tilted its head. Then it took another step forward. One more step, and it would be out. Eddie was shaking. His reflection was reaching for him. I grabbed his wrist. Walk backward, I whispered. He didn't move. His breathing was too fast. His copy, his smiling, empty-eyed twin, was right at the surface of the mirror. One more second. And Eddie blinked. The mirror shattered. Glass exploded outward, shards flying through the air like razors. I threw my arms over my face, felt the sting of tiny cuts across my skin, and then Eddie was gone. I spun around. Eddie? The room was silent, just broken glass. The air felt wrong. I turned back to the mirror's remains, and my stomach dropped, because in the cracked reflection, Eddie was still there, trapped, his eyes wide, his fists slamming against the glass, his mouth opening in a scream I couldn't hear. And behind him, the things in the dark moved. They dragged him back. The mirror's surface rippled, swallowing him whole. And then, it was just me, alone. The funeral home shifted. The walls warped. The air grew thin. I tried to move, but I couldn't, because something was standing behind me. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I just felt it. Too tall. Too close. I had a breath at the back of my neck, cold and damp, smelling of earth and rot. Then, a whisper. Low, raspy, familiar. You already broke the rules. It's too late. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. Then, everything went black, and the last thing I heard was laughter.